On this episode of the NHL at the Rink podcast, we talked to Alex Killorn from the Anaheim Ducks about the growth of his team and what he's seen out there in Southern California. We dive into the GM's meetings, which are going on this week. We talk Carolina Hurricanes, Columbus Blue Jackets, and playoff races, all coming up and more on this episode of the NHL at the Rink podcast.
NHL at the Rink is presented by Skip, the official food delivery app of the NHL.
Welcome into another episode of the NHL at the Rink podcast, as always brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. Sean, I remember that. I've memorized that line now. I've memorized the Skip Reed line, so I'm very proud of myself.
No more cheat sheet?
No more cheat sheet. I have it on my phone, and it took a little while, but I got it done. I memorized it, so I'm proud of myself. It's an accomplishment for me, I think.
A+ for you, Dan.
I get a good grade. Listen, I'm down in sunny Florida right now. I am blocking, as you pointed out, before we started recording, I'm blocking the sun, from you because it would be very bright here. I have a beautiful ocean view room at the O Palm Beach, and I'm going to stop myself right there because, it's one of those places where you come to and it's like there's, it's the general manager's meetings, and I look around and I'm like, what am I doing staying here? But I am staying here, Sean, and I'm proud of that too. But I'm a little bit, maybe out of place.
You deserve it, Dan, and you're never out of place anywhere you go.
Well, the sarcasm's dripping right off of you there. So there is that. But the GM meetings are going on. In fact, they're going on right now as we are recording this Tuesday morning. And listen, you and I have covered these meetings before when it felt like the sky was falling all around, right? We had, the hits to the head, Rule 48, all this stuff, concussions and things along those lines. And the last several times these meetings have been gone on, it's a lot of positive state of the game stuff, and that's what it is again here. There's a lot of good things going on. All you have to do is really pay attention, right, Sean, to know there's a lot of good things going on. And the GMs yesterday were given, multiple things happened on Monday that I thought were interesting. But, with Unitalk State of the Game, they were given sort of a state of the game recap right now of what's going on. And, for example, offense, over 6 goals a game for the 4th straight year. First time in 30 years that it's been a 4-year run like that. Power play percentage is at 21.6%. That's a high since 1985-86. Even strength goals, they're up. Highest since 1972-73, 77.8% for even strength goals. These are good things. And the other thing is there was talk coming into this about overtime because we saw the 10-minute overtime in the Four Nations face-off, and would there be a discussion on that? And there very well could be a discussion on that. But goals scored in overtime, games ending in overtime, 74%. It's an all-time high.
Look, those are great numbers. We don't even need them. Just watch the game, and it's a better game than it was. I don't think there's a league and a fan base that's better at navel gazing than the NHL.
Yes.
It is the most critical fan base, I think, in the world, but it's because of the extreme dedication to the sport, right? The passion that people have for it and the desire for it to be the best possible game that it can be. But I think even the staunchest critic would have to say that the game is in a good place right now, and specifically to overtime, to go from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. It seems like nothing, right? Let's just add 5 minutes. Well, those are 5 minutes that have to be played by players, and there's only a certain amount of players that play in overtime, right? Maybe you expand it if you go to 10 minutes, but right now, 5-minute overtime is pretty much a 6-player experience for most teams. And the logistics, right, of getting out of a building on a back-to-back, having to go someplace else, you're adding tension on the players' bodies, on their recovery, on everything else. For what, when you're finishing at 75% anyway?
Well, that's the thing. That's the point, right? I mean, we're looking at last year, we were promoting the number 70% because that's how many games that went to overtime were ending in overtime, and that was an all-time high. Now we're up to 74.1%, and it's the highest rate of games that extend to overtime, ending in overtime for the third straight year. It's the third straight year we're going to set a high at that rate. 56 shootouts right now this season. It's going to be, on track for an all-time low in games decided in a shootout. I think more people want to see games decided in overtime, less want to see it in a shootout. If it goes to the shootout, that's okay. You're okay with that. But what you're pointing out, Sean, makes a lot of sense. That extra little time taxes the body. And I don't know if teams would, if it went to 10-minute overtime, I don't know that coaches would throw different guys out on the ice. That point means so much in these competitive races that I don't know that they would. I think they would still run their big guns out there and say, guys, sorry, we got to go get that point, right? That's what we got to do. But there's no need to do it when you're looking at just 25, 26% of the games. 3/4 of the games that go to overtime are ending in overtime. That's a really good number right now. The only way, is to go to a tie, right? If you want to avoid a shootout, really is to go to the tie. You're not going to play overtime like they do in the playoffs. And the other point, listen, you're right. These games, there's back-to-backs. There's 3 and 4. This season in particular. In the Olympic season, it will be. They're condensed schedules. These teams are traveling. There's a lot. That extra little time, those extra few shifts over the course of an 82-game season with the travel, that will add up, and I don't know that the players would be for it, to be honest with you. Didn't Nathan McKinnon at the Four Nations face-off when I think the one game Canada-Sweden, I think, extended into about 6 or 7 minutes into overtime, and he's just like, I don't know about this, I'm not so sure about this.
Yeah, no, and it's right. That's best on best. There's no break in overtime, and they use the full ice now. Like, it's not like you're just staying in the zone, right? If things don't look right, they come back out. You look at the edge numbers and how much skating is done in those extra periods. It just, like I said, it all adds up, and I don't think it adds up to anything tangible with the way that overtime is played now, because they go for it right off the drop, right? There were times in the past where they didn't, where teams almost played for one shot. They kept reloading. You don't see that as much anymore. It's more, let's go and get this over with and do it as quickly as we can type of mindset. So to a degree, I think that's why we're at 3/4.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting? So you're right about pointing out, like, you don't need the numbers necessarily. Just watch the games and you see it's a better product. The numbers just back it up, obviously. But two interesting numbers to me that the GMs were shown. And I know all this because the media was then brought in and shown a shorter, condensed presentation of the same thing. 10.5% shooting percentage. 10.5 shooting percentage, right? That's the highest since 1993-94. That's where we're at about right now. And the other thing is 436 empty net goals. And we're on pace for the most empty net goals in NHL history. I think that's the pace right now that we're on. The shooting percentage suggests to me that exactly what we know, that these guys are just better in so many areas that it's hard to be a goalie right now. Okay, that's really hard to be a goalie right now. And the empty net goals shows exactly what we also know. There's so many one-goal games. So many one-goal games. So many tight games right now that the goalies are being pulled. If it was a 5-1 game, you're not pulling your goalie, right? It's a 2-1, 3-2, 4-3 games going into the last 2 minutes. 5-3 even, you're pulling the goalie in the last 4 minutes, and you're getting more empty net goals as a result of that. And that's maybe it's, pushing the number of goals scored all, up a little bit. That's okay. But these are real goals. I mean, you got to get the puck. You got to score. You're one man short when it's happening. But I just thought those two numbers, the shooting percentage shows the skill and how hard it is to be a goalie, and the empty net goals shows just how tight these games are.
Yeah, and look, it's incredibly hard to be a goalie these days. And I think when you look at players like Hellebuck, who are consistently excellent, like, it's even a greater accomplishment than it's been in the past, because there's no question that the skill is unbelievable. We had Stuart Skinner in the office the other day on their off day when they were in New York City, and I spoke to him for a little bit, and like, the biggest thing now is the East-West, right? That's come into the game in the last few years. It's a nightmare for goalies, right? Because of the amount of stress and strain that they put on their bodies to get from post to post repeated, having to reload and do it over and over again because of the skill in the offensive zone that players have, and a willingness to kind of stretch the play laterally and make it more difficult, because goalies are going to save a straight on shot. You come down the wing, unless you're OV and you're going to put it through the goalie, you come down the wing and you take a shot, 9 times out of 10 it's going to be saved. So you need to put some movement on the puck, and the defenseman's willingness to block shots is at an all-time high too. So you have to be more creative to score, and clearly the forwards are doing that if they're scoring at over 10%.
Yeah, it actually goes right into another point, I think, that was discussed already at these meetings. But first, did want to bring up our guest today, Alex Killorn from the Anaheim Ducks, veteran forward for them, repeat guest on the NHL At the Rink podcast, so we love him. Alex joined us. He's got a partnership with AstraZeneca and the new Body Check Cup Challenge. He talked to us a lot about that, but also about the Ducks and the growth that he's seen there in Anaheim since he's been there. So that interview will be coming up soon. But before we get there, Sean, about that goalie stuff. So they also talked about video review, coach's challenge. There was a lot on that. The general managers did their breakout groups on Monday. They were shown 55 clips of goals. Like, should this be a goal? Should this not be a goal? The NHL basically wanted to show them the process by which they could come up with these, educate the general managers on the process, get feedback from them. They called it checking their compass. Are we pointing in the right direction or not? Because remember, when they put in the coach's challenge rule, it was 2015-16 season. There were a lot of GMs who weren't GMs then, right? I mean, so they've come in because these are the rules now, and they've learned through them. But they wanted to educate a little bit on it, and the key part that they were looking at was goalie interference, because that's the hardest one, right? That's the one that makes it so difficult. That's the one that draws the biggest debates. But they laid out to us, the media, sort of the guidelines by which they follow, like, where was the player? Was he in the white paint or the blue paint? Okay, if he's in the blue paint, you're allowed to go to the blue paint. Did he initiate contact with the goaltender? Was something else forcing him into contact with the goaltender? Was the goaltender initiating contact? Was he pushed in? Was it avoidable? Could the goalie reset and make the save? They go through this whole checklist when they make these decisions. But I think the larger point here, and it goes back to what you were talking about with goaltending, Sean, is they've been 108 goalie challenges for goaltender interference this season, with 62 goals overturned. That's the most we've seen in a while. Okay, it's actually a 4-year high. I want to say it is. There were 88 goalie challenges for goaltender interference last year, 85 the year before, 82. So we're now at 108. Why is that? My bigger point here, and I'm taking long to get it, is guys are going to the net. There's so much activity at the net. That makes it harder for the goaltender. But guys are going to the net now, and it's almost like they're not trying to interfere with the goaltender, but there's bumping, and they don't care if they bump, because that goal makes such a difference in winning and losing, in getting into the playoffs or not. So guys are going there. You always hear it all the time. Like, what do we got to do? We got to get pucks and bodies to the blue paint, right? So more guys are going to the net, more goalie interference challenges.
So why don't they just make the blue paint off limits?
Because, it's a good question, because I don't think that they want to impede a guy from the ability to get there, as long as he's not impeding the goaltender from making the save. And Kay Whitmore, who works in hockey ops, former goalie, and he does all the goalie stuff, he actually brought this up. He said, the benefit of the doubt is we'll always go to the goaltender if he's deep in his blue paint. He'll always get the benefit of the doubt because he's playing his position deep in. The benefit of the doubt will go to the player if he's at the top of the blue, very top of the blue, or in the white. It'll go to the player because the goaltender's further out. That's kind of how it goes, and this is why these decisions they're consistent with how they approach it, but obviously, they get a lot of debate. But I don't think they want to stop guys from going in the blue paint. I don't think they want to make that off limits for players because a lot of goals are scored right around there, and they don't want to take a lot of goals off the board.
But you're not taking the goals off the board if you know that it's off limits, right? Like, players are smart. They're going to take as much liberty as they can. You're going to let me go to the blue paint, but you're only going to let me go to the edge of the blue paint? Well, define the edge. I'm going to put my skate inside the goal. That's the edge of the blue paint until you tell me differently.
Well, and
right?
they do tell them different. That's why the goalie
challenge.
That's why the challenge exists.
Yeah, but the whole argument that, like, when the goalie gets bumped, right, and he can't make the save, people always say, well, he didn't reset because he got bumped and he knew if the goal went in, it's not going to count. Well, A, the goalie doesn't know that. So you'd be an idiot as a goalie to be like, oh, I got bumped. I'm going to pretend I can't get back into position. I'm going to let him score, and then they're going to take it off the board. Because it's not going to happen every time, right? So it's become more and more like the NFL. And I don't know that this is a bad thing or not. Like, the NFL is so offensive now. You know, the quarterback is completely free of being hit in any way. Defensive backs can't play the way they did 10 years ago, right? And it's juiced offense. And it seems to me that that's the way that the NHL is going, right? They want more goals on the board, and that's all well and good. But there should be a place for a goaltender.
There is a place for a goaltender. They're not denying the goal. If the goaltender is impeded from his ability to make the save, they will call goaltender interference. At times, it's a minor penalty.
But there would be no need if there was a safe place for a goaltender, for goalie interference. It would be black and white.
Then decrease. This is totally not going to happen. Then make the crease. Don't make the creases deep. Shorten the crease. Give the player more space.
Okay, well, I mean, look, we're going to argue about it from two different ways because I am entrenched deeply in the goaltender union.
I know, you're a goalie union guy. So
it's in my genes.
I know.
But it does seem to me like that the easiest way to avoid goaltender interference is to set a clear parameter. Like now, like you just explained it. Oh, you can go to the top of the blue.
No, you can go in the blue. Just you can't impede the goaltender. You're not. There's no rule that prevents you from going in the blue paint.
No, I
can't bump the goalie.
That. But you said that Kay Whitmore said that if you go to the top of the paint, you're going to get the benefit of the doubt. If the goalie's deep in his crease, he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. As a goalie, you're taught that the blue is yours.
Well, I think what Kay, let me clarify. Kay was talking about the top of the blue, but really he said in the white, but you maybe have a foot in the blue. Like a toe in the blue is okay. You know what I mean? Like in that situation. So that's why you're going to get the benefit of the doubt. And they showed a clip of, I forget who it was. It might have been UC Saros, where it was Kyle Palmieri coming through, and UC Saros was reaching out, right? But he was reaching out into the white. Like it was beyond the blue paint. And Palmieri, it was reviewed for goaltender interference, but it wasn't ruled that because Palmieri, while he might have had 1 foot in the blue, I'd have to remember the play, he was trying to avoid that area, and it was unavoidable contact because it was Saros reaching out into beyond the blue paint. Even though he's in the blue paint, UC Saros, he's reaching his glove beyond that.
Yeah, I just think that it's always going to be a point of contention, right?
It is.
It's one of those things.
It's our pass interference.
It's beautiful. Like,
yeah.
I don't have a problem with it. Like, I think the debate's healthy. I think there's human interpretation in all games. You know, one ref sees it as goalie interference, another one doesn't. I think you know who those refs are if you're a player, right? Like, it all goes in. It's all part of the game. It's all part of the beauty of the game. And I could say that because I don't have a team.
Well, that's 100% right.
When
and
you have a team and your goalie gets bumped and they allow the goal to go in and it cost you something tangible, then all this theoretical, oh, I think it's great, I think it's romantic, I think, there should be some interpretation and there should be some, all that goes out the window. I can't believe I just got robbed.
Almost every general manager here will admit that they look at the play a lot differently when it involves their team as opposed to when they can be a neutral observer. But you remember, when these challenges are initiated for goaltender interference, well, for all the challenges, it's been the same guys doing the review. All of them. It's the guys in the hockey ops office, and it's been the same guys. Chris King, Kay Whitmore, Rod Pasma, and Coley Campbell. They've been doing it since this was started, so there's consistency there. We could go on and on about it because it is one of those topics. And I think, they're probably, as we do this right now, they're probably talking about that in their meeting. And I wish I was in the meeting, but I'm not. I'm talking to you instead. But you know what we can do? We did have Alex Killorn on, right, Sean? So maybe it's time we switch away from the goalie interference and talk a little Anaheim Ducks with Killorn.
Yeah, and they have two pretty good goalies, so
they do.
I think it's a fine segue, and Alex is going to talk about them. So let's go to Alex right now.
Yeah, and here is Alex Killorn. We did an interview with him. Again, he's doing some work with AstraZeneca right now. He talks about that, and this interview is brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. Alex, thanks so much for joining us. So before we get going into the hockey, I definitely wanted to give you the floor, if you will, and give you an opportunity here to talk about a pretty important partnership that you have right now with AstraZeneca and the new Body Check Cup Challenge. I wonder if you could just kind of take us through how you got involved and what this means to you.
Yeah, so I was approached by AstraZeneca to kind of get involved with this, Get Body Check Challenge against cancer. I've had family members that have died because of cancer. So not my parents, but grandparents that have been affected by it. So it's something that's really close to me. And basically what AstraZeneca is trying to help promote is just to get early screenings. And, a lot of times when you can get early screened, you can detect these things earlier than usual, which, is much better than detecting it later, obviously. And the website is getbodycheck.com. And what they're going to do is this fun thing. They're going to do a Body Check Cup Challenge. Basically, when you go to this website, getbodycheck.com, you're basically you could put in which team you root for, and they're going to figure out which team kind of won based on who gets screened the most.
Oh, well, a little competition always makes it a little more fun, right?
Exactly.
So let's get into hockey a little bit. I mean, it's a great partnership, obviously, that you're doing. And but the hockey, is going on. The games are going on. And your Ducks, you're in Dallas right now. You guys had that run, and it bridged the Four Nations face-off. You came out of it with a win, too. There was like a 7-1 stretch there where you fought your way back in. It's dipped a little bit since, but what did you see in that run? And did that run kind of give you, a veteran player who's won before, an indication of like, hey, okay, we're going in the right direction here?
For sure. And I think with the Ducks, we've had these parts of the season where we've had a ton of success. And to have it at that moment, we kind of wished we kept playing and there wasn't a Four Nations, so we can maybe make it an 11-2 or 10-3, where we can continue with that momentum. But we did actually do pretty well out of the Four Nations tournament. But it's like we've said, a lot of guys on the Ducks the past couple of years at this point in the season haven't really been able to play in meaningful games. And at the stage we're at as a team right now, these games are so important. We could see a playoff spot in our grasp. And the teams that we're all racing for are, we get to play them coming down the stretch. So it's great to be playing in meaningful games. And I think it just shows that the future is bright in Anaheim.
Is it possible to even describe the difference between a game when you're 4 points out of the playoffs as opposed to playing out the string late in the season like maybe you guys did last year? Is it possible to even explain to somebody who hasn't experienced it what the difference is?
Yeah, well, the games kind of take on somewhat of a playoff atmosphere. I don't want to say it's exactly like the playoffs, but especially when you could have these 4-point swings with teams that you're chasing, like for us, Utah, Vancouver, and Calgary. Those are huge games with huge points. And for the young guys to just be in these games where the pressure is elevated, there's more pressure in these games than we've had in the past. So it's great experience. But it's also a great opportunity to kind of see a playoff spot and go grasp it.
You know, though, you look at the balance of your season, whether you guys make it or not, and obviously you're pushing to make it, but the balance of your season, it's better than last season. You've already got more wins than last season, obviously more points to go along with your scoring more goals than last season. So that's what you want to see, right? I mean, when you signed there, you had to know what you were getting yourself into, and you had to know that what you wanted to see. Has the team played above expectations, at expectations relative to what you expected? Where are you at for the balance of the season here?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a tough question to ask. And when I signed here, like you said, I knew exactly what I was getting into, and that was explained to me. Um, I think it's on pace with what I thought. Maybe, I like to be optimistic, and last year was very disappointing. Maybe I set the level a little too high, thinking that things could change very quickly. But now that I've been here, I understand how difficult it is to win in the NHL, and balancing developing young players and winning, and how hard it really is. And both things are so important because you have to develop these young guys, because these are the guys that are going to be the reason you win in the future. So I guess I've been pleasantly surprised, and I think we're right on track.
I was going to ask you, when you look at it, when you came into the league, it was kind of with Tampa, it was kind of their ascendancy. You were a young player on those teams as they climbed into playoff contention, and then became a superpower or battleship in the league for several years until you left. And I'm curious, when you go through that, you're kind of blind to it. You're just trying to survive and everything else. But have you been able to apply those lessons with the Ducks, because you lived what all of these young players are living now, as they try and find their way up the ladder?
For sure. I mean, it's a similar situation. I remember, I think it was Coop's first year. Guys like me, Palat, Tyler Johnson, Radko Gudas were all like the young guys.
Yeah.
I think the difference in Anaheim is, in Tampa we had 4 young guys. Here we have like 10 young guys. So it's a little different in that aspect. And we had, in Tampa we had Hall of Famers and Marty St. Louis, Stamkos, Vinny LeCavalier, all guys that were there. So there's some differences, but I think also these young players in Anaheim are going to be better than me, Johnson, Palat, and Gudas, if that makes sense. So, yeah, a lot to look forward to for sure.
Have you called up any of your mentors and apologized now that you're in the mentee?
I do sometimes, like on the bench, if I want to yell or I'm really frustrated. I think, that was probably me at one point. So, maybe just don't take it easy on the guys and go talk to them in a more positive light, because that was me one day. I made a ton of mistakes when I was young. Like, it's just part of the process.
I was going to ask, do you like being the 35-year-old mentor as opposed to the 25-year-old or 22-year-old young guy? But, I mean, it's so different. It's a different part of your career too. Are you enjoying it? I mean, is it invigorating to you or reinvigorating to you to be in this role as opposed to the one you were previously in?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. The great part about Anaheim is we have a great group of guys, and the young guys are so willing to learn, and they want to do well. They all have great attitudes. So, like you said, it's different. Being a 27-year-old in Tampa playing for Stanley Cups was fun too.
Yeah.
But it's just a different part of my career, and I understood that getting into this. I think the rewarding part is when you could see the light. Like, you understand that this is going in the right direction when you see these players like Leo Carlsson like have these unbelievable games, and you see Lucas Dostal standing on his head. Like, the parts are there, right? So that's rewarding part, seeing them get better.
I wanted to actually ask you about Lucas, because you played in front of a really good goalie in Tampa Bay, who again was kind of young when you started there and grew into a superstar. But Lucas is somewhat not somewhat, he's underrated. A lot of people don't know of him. I'm curious, what your impressions have been as you watch him this year, and he's really kind of come into his own. I mean, obviously John's been there forever, and he's the goalie that we associate with in Anaheim, and he's
Yeah.
still very good. But to me, Lucas has been one of the best goalies in the league this year.
Yeah, I think he's super underrated. Part of that is playing in the West Coast. I think everyone knows, you fly a little bit under the radar in that sense. I think his numbers speak for themselves. When you talk about Vasilevsky, I played with them both when they were young goalies, him and Dostal, and there's a ton of similarities. Like Vasilevsky's a bigger presence, just he's a bigger body, but their work ethic is very similar. Like they're the two hardest working guys on the team, super prepared for games. I think the advantage Dostal has is that he has a tandem where he doesn't have to play 70 games or 65 games a year, which takes a huge load off his back, and probably helps him with consistency as a young goalie, which is so hard to come by. Where Vasilevsky was kind of thrown to the wolves a little bit, which I think is a reason why he became so good. But it's just a little bit easier when you can have a tandem with John Gibson, who's been playing great as well this year.
It's funny you brought up Dostal. You also brought up Leo Carlsson, and I wanted to ask you about Leo Carlsson. We saw him briefly at the Four Nations face-off, best on best type of competition. He looked like he could hold his own. This is a big guy. He's having another good second season. He's playing more. What do you see in him? You're around him every day. You see him in practice. Like, what do you see in this guy? What is he going to be in 3, 4, 5 years?
Yeah, and I think that's the most exciting part about Leo is like this. I don't think any of us know where the ceiling is with him. Whereas some guys you can kind of, where they're going to be. He has so much talent, and his speed, his ability to cut through the neutral zone is like nothing I've ever seen before. I think as a young guy, consistency is always tough to come by, and he's super young. But I think with him, like I said, there's no telling how far he can go just with the talent that he brings on the ice.
What's it been like as you've been there in Anaheim, right? As this has started to happen, I go all the way back to when the Ducks were really good, and we traveled there a lot to see the games, and that can be a great place. And it had kind of died down a little bit as you guys have kind of grown and become more of a contender. What's the atmosphere in Anaheim been like for you?
It's been great. I mean, I've seen it, and even in my short time here, I've seen it grow. When you start winning, you get more fans. It's pretty simple. And I think the ownership is putting a ton into that area around the arena.
Yeah.
So that's obviously big when an owner is willing to commit that much to the area. I think the fans are great in Anaheim. They're really bought in, and you could see it in the crowd. The crowds have been unbelievable.
Well, I mean, it helps. You want to win, right? And winning it brings everybody out. But when you have young talent, you can watch as a fan, right? If you're a diehard fan and you have nobody, like you're just kind of middling around, but there seems to be a plan in place, right? I mean, is that something you hear about that? I'm sure, like, the young talent will draw in a lot of people. It did in Tampa.
For sure. No, and we have plenty of young talent, right? So it's going to be fun. Like you said, these diehard fans are going to be able to see a Leo Carlsson as a rookie, and in 5 years, see what he is, And guys forget, like Trevor Zegras is 23 years old. Mason McTavish just turned 21. Mintikov, Zellweger. You go down, Cutter Gauthier just got out of college. Like,
yeah,
there's so many young guys on this team, and to be honest, in the NHL, it's tough with a lot of young guys because consistency is tough, and they haven't played a long time. But like you said, as a fan, you can see the trajectory. You can see how these players have these great moments. So it's something to be really excited about as a fan.
Are those the conversations you guys as veteran players are having around there too? Like, do you talk about the young guys and the growth that you're seeing amongst them, or is it more, what happens on the ice? Are these the conversations you and Ryan Strome and Vatrano are having?
For sure, I think. And it works both ways, right? Like as an older guy, you kind of sometimes put on like a coach hat. Like, you can get frustrated and you could want to yell, but you got to realize, like, at one point you were one of these guys.
Yeah.
Like, you were making mistakes when you're younger. So it's really easy to yell at a guy. It's different to grab him and try to help him along the way. And that's what we've kind of been trying to do. And I think this year we've been much better at that. Like, instead of just yelling at each other, it's kind of like, let's help each other get better. And, you know, us veterans aren't perfect either. Like, there's stuff we can do that to make the team better. So we're all in the same boat. It's just about helping each other get a little better every day.
I can't believe you told me that Trevor's 23. I thought he was like 29.
I know, right?
It seems like
I
he's been in
think
the
he's
league
20.
for.
I hope he's 23. I think, yeah, he's 23.
All right, man. We don't want to keep you too long. It's St. Patty's Day in Dallas. Always a good time. Before you go, one last shout out for the Body Check program.
Yeah, so obviously I partnered with AstraZeneca, and we're doing this thing, Body Check Cup Challenge. Basically, you go to getbodycheck.com. You sign up for an early screening, get screened, talk to your doctor, and, you know, the fan base that shows out will win certain prizes and whatnot.
Great stuff, man. We really appreciate you. You're a repeat guest now, so
Yes.
we're very happy to have you back. Good luck with the rest of the season. We'll be watching. You never know, right? I mean, these Ducks might make it in. Thanks so
Go on
much,
a run
right?
here. Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
That interview was brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. Sean, great stuff there from Alex Killorn. Again, repeat guest for us on the NHL At the Rink podcast. We're always appreciative of our repeat guests. And the Ducks, look, I mean, right, Sean, the Ducks are, look, I don't think they're in it right now, but I understand where he's coming from with the belief that they have, and they believe they're playing meaningful games right now. And if they string together a stretch that they had from, you know, mid-January to mid-February or late February after the break, then they might come right back in it. But they were 7-1 in an 8-game stretch there, and since then it hasn't gone their way. But I there's optimism there in Anaheim, and that's a good thing. You and I have been in Anaheim when it's been good, and it's really good there when the team is rolling.
Yeah, no, and we talked to Alex a little bit about that, and, you know, he said he could feel the difference. You look at the ratings and the engagement, you know, the Ducks just put something out today about how much more pronounced they are, you know, this year. You know, clearly there's hope, and they may be 8 points out as we talk, right, Tuesday morning, but things change in a hurry, for sure, and they have some teams to climb over. But more than being in a wild card, they're playing games now that are meaningful to them, to the other team, sometimes at the same time, and they're different games, right? They're different games than the San Jose Sharks are playing right now, who are eliminated from the playoffs. They're different games than the Chicago Blackhawks are playing right now, who are close to being eliminated from the playoffs. They're playing for themselves. They're playing for contracts. They're playing for whatever it is. The Ducks are playing for something bigger, and it's going to serve them well as they continue to move forward. Like, you know, we talked to Alex a little bit about Tampa Bay and their progression, but what I think about even more is the Ottawa Senators, right? How close they came a couple of years. And now this year they seem to have figured it out, right? It's late in the year and they keep winning, and they keep building a little bit of a cushion there in that wild card and pushing into the divisional picture, right? And I think it's because they've played those games in the past. This isn't their first kick at it. So nobody's like, oh my God, I can't believe the intensity of these games. I can't believe what we have to do to win. They know what they have to do to win. And that's what all of Anaheim's young players are learning now.
Yeah, they're in that next phase. San Jose and Chicago are not in that phase. The Anaheim Ducks have graduated into that next phase, playing these important games. The Montreal Canadiens have graduated into that next phase, playing these important games that, you know, Montreal's only 1 point back, and we'll get into that, you know, here in a minute. But, like, they're so important, and they're whether they get in or not, and odds would tell you they're not going to get in, they'll be better for it next year. And that's the growth you need to see. When you're in a situation like the Ducks are in, that's the growth you need to see. And frankly, that's the growth that the Chicago Blackhawks and the San Jose Sharks have to see next season. Like, if you can't keep rolling out these years where you're getting 25 wins and, you know, oh, we're young. You can't do it. You got to graduate to the next phase at some point. The Ducks have graduated to that next phase, so good for them. And you know, I like the mix there too. They're young guys, but then they have the veteran guys like Killorn and Strome and Vetrano, right? I mean, there's a good mix in Anaheim right now, and they're building it, and they've got a nice young goalie there. There's a lot of reasons for optimism there in Anaheim. They won't make the playoffs this year. We'd both be shocked if they got in, right? It would be a surprising run for them to get in. I mean, maybe they do, but I would bet against it. That's okay. Like that's okay. The team that's falling a little bit now, Sean, we'll switch to the East. The Columbus Blue Jackets are falling now. They're not out of it. They haven't fallen out of it. Let's not say that. But since the Stadium Series, they've lost 6 of 7. And I know they looked really good against the Devils last night, Monday night. I think Jake Allen made 45 saves and whatnot. But they didn't get to win. They didn't score goals. That's the thing. This team was scoring a ton of goals, and now they're not scoring goals. And it's an alarming stretch here for them. They're still only 2 points out. But now it's Detroit that's a notch ahead of them just by the tiebreak. Montreal's a notch ahead of them. And the Rangers. So it's not them clear of these other teams. It's them having to get past these other teams. And they've been such a great story this year. But I do worry, and this could turn. This could turn. I freely admit that. But I do, for the Blue Jackets, have the concern of maybe they're running out of steam, Sean.
I think that the Stadium Series and those back-to-back games against Detroit were so emotional.
Yeah.
Right, with everything that happened, the success, right, and the excitement of the success. They had climbed them all the way back into a playoff spot. You know, they were feeling really good about themselves. And then the Stadium Series, it's one of the most emotional games I've ever been to, right, with everything that was going around, with all the Johnny Gaudreau stuff, you know, the celebration of hockey in Columbus, 90,000-plus fans. Like, everybody felt it was such a good feel-good story. They win. They looked awesome doing it. It was almost like the end, right? Like, that was it. And that's how they've kind of played coming out of it. They've struggled to score. Look, I watched that Devils game last night, and they dominated. Like, just completely dominated. The Devils were a little bit better in the first period, but they only had 5 shots, but they had a lot of offensive play. But after that, they were just surviving. New Jersey, and New Jersey needs wins too. It's not like they're in and you know, they're all set. You know, they need to hold on to that third spot in their division. So it wasn't like they weren't interested in playing. They were just being dominated by Columbus, and they ran into a hot goaltender. You know, and that happens except Columbus doesn't have the cushion to just write those games off anymore, right? If you're safely ensconced in the playoffs and you run into a super hot goalie, oh well, that game got away from us because their goalie was better than all of us. And you can live with that. Like, you can't live with this if you're Columbus anymore. They've had the closed door player meeting, you know, they can feel their collars getting tight. They're gripping their sticks harder, and they need to figure it out really fast. But they're a team that hasn't done this before. This is uncharted territory for them. Like, they have a lot of young kids on their team. They're closer to Anaheim.
They were not supposed to be anywhere near where they're at right now.
Yeah.
And Sean, that's before the tragedy with Johnny Gaudreau. They were supposed to be worse than this, to use those terms, with Johnny Gaudreau. Then that whole thing happened, and we all know we don't need to rehash. And they've played on emotion, and they've been better, and they've scored goals. And I love the way Dean Evason's coaching them. But it goes to they talked about it. Zach Werenski talked about it. He said the goal was get to the Stadium Series game playing meaningful games. That was the initial goal this season, right? And then see where it goes from there. They accomplished that goal. But that's what I'm saying. I think they might be running out of steam. You wonder, did it take so much out of them to get there that now, even the way they played against the Devils, the other night, where they had 24 shots in the third period, it may be more of a one-off than what could be the norm for them going forward here, because they're going to have to play like that. And honestly, Sean, I don't know if they're going to have enough in the tank to continue to play like that for another 15 games. Like it's asking a lot in a playoff race that they're not alone in right now, and they and Montreal are the two teams in that race, if you will, that haven't done this before.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge part of it for each of them, as they go forward. To me, the shocking thing is that they can't score.
I know.
Right? They got shut out twice before this. They were well on their way to being shut out last night. It went into the third period. I think it was 180-plus minutes so that they hadn't scored a goal. Like, this is a team that was scoring goals basically in their sleep for a long time. And they have incredible offensive talent. Like I said, I just think the margins become so thin now. And it's almost like you get to March. I had to think about what month we're in. Like, you get to March, and it becomes a different game.
Yeah. Get past the trade deadline. This is a different game. This is a fight for your life game. And until you know how to do that, it makes it hard. We talked about that with Anaheim, right? Like, they're learning it now. They're not fighting for their lives. They're playing a little bit pressure-free, Anaheim, right? Like, this is like, hey, let's see if we can fight our way back into this. Columbus is like, we were in it. We were in a playoff spot. We were in a playoff spot 2 weeks ago. And, a week ago, we were in a playoff spot, and now we're not. And now we're looking up. And now we're not just looking up at one team. We're looking up at three. And it's a lot harder. And, oh, my goodness, are we going to be able to survive this? And, oh, this injury, that's killing us right now. And this happening. And, I'm beat up. And, we're not being able to score. We've gone dry. We've run into hot goalies. There's all these things that happen. And until you go through it, it's hard. This is hard. This is a really hard time to go through it right now. A couple other teams that
before you go further, you mentioned Montreal, Dan. And I have a little pet peeve that I need to air right now.
Uh-oh.
We did our trophy trackers last week.
Yes.
Right? Everybody should go back on NHL.com, find them, and look at them. Dean didn't win the Adams at the three-quarter mark, which to me is criminal. But more criminal than that is Marty St. Louis got one vote from 15 people voting.
Now you got to make me look. Who did I vote for?
I think
I don't remember who the vote was.
I think you know who voted for him. That would be me.
You voted for Marty St. Louis. All right.
That's why I'm upset. I couldn't believe when I tallied it all up that the man had one vote. They're almost in the playoffs. The Montreal Canadiens left for dead.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
Like, I'm not saying he's in the top 5 because there's been a lot of good coaching jobs this year.
Yeah, I didn't vote for him. I know that. I'm looking at it now.
I think there were 16 people who voted, and they had 5 coaches they could choose from. So, quick math, that's 80.
1 vote.
Points. 80 points that are available. He got 1 point.
Okay. Fair. Listen, I didn't have Dean Evason number 1. Did you have Dean Evason number 1?
I sure did.
I had Spencer Carberry number 1. I had Dean Evason 2. I had Carberry 1. I love the job that Spencer Carberry has done with that team this season. And while I mentioned Spencer Carberry, let's quickly mention the Alex Ovechkin, the great chase. He's 8 goals away, right?
Look
like
at Dan
that segue?
changing the subject.
You like that segue? Well, I changed the subject, and I had a good segue, so I'm very proud of myself for that. Listen, 8 goals away. I still think he does it this season, Sean. I do. He scored only 1 goal on that 3-game trip. It was in San Jose. They've got, what do they got? They got 15 games left. The Capitals, they play tonight, right? They play tonight against Detroit.
Yep.
They got 15 games left. I'm still liking his chances. I'm still liking his chances to score 8 and 15. I don't know about that April 6th date that I was eyeing, because that might be a little bit of a stretch. I think that's 10 games away, if I'm doing the math correctly. But maybe it's April 15th at UBS Arena, because they play there twice. Still think he does it. Although I think to feel really good about it, he's going to do it. It's just a matter of this season. To feel really good about it, I think he needed another goal on that trip. But I still think he does it.
And I still think it goes into next year. I just, we've talked about how meaningful the games are. Like, take San Jose out of the equation because they were eliminated that day. Or they were eliminated with that result, and then the results of St. Louis and Vancouver after it. But they're playing playoff-like games against teams that are jockeying for playoff position, right? The Capitals are first place. The only thing they're fighting for is whether it's them or Winnipeg wins the President's Trophy, and I honestly don't think Washington cares whether they win the President's Trophy.
No, I don't think any. No,
it's
not.
As superstitious as hockey players are, it's a curse to win it. But almost every team that they play has something meaningful to play for, right? So you're playing that tight check-in. Look, Carberry said it the other day. He said he's starting to notice teams are cheating.
Yeah, they don't want. And Tom Galiti wrote about this, and I was going to bring that up. Right, they're defending Ovechkin a little bit harder. They're cheating toward. They don't want. He said it right. They don't want to be on the ice when he scores the goal. They don't want to be the team he scores against.
And so they're going to cheat. And look, Alex has been great. I think the one thing that nobody's really talked about in this whole chase is it hasn't consumed him because all he does is assist and score empty netters, right? Like,
No.
It's not all he does, but he's doing
No.
a lot of it, right? He's getting a ton of assists because he understands as a player, I want to shoot. There's two guys in front of me. Let me do the math. They have 5 guys. We have 5 guys. I'm standing here. There's 2 guys in front of me. That means somebody's wide open. Let me pick my head up and pass it to that person. And then even on the empty net goal the other day when he gave it to Protas so he could get his hat trick, right? Like, he's a team-first guy. Like, as much as this is an individual record and he will be known individually for doing it, the team is what this is all about for Alex, right? So he's not sacrificing the Capitals game or his game. Well, he is sacrificing his game a little bit because he understands the matrix.
Well, I mean,
The
he deserves
matrix
a ton of
isn't
credit.
set up for him.
Yeah, he deserves a ton of credit for doing it that way. Well, that it's remarkable that he's doing it that way. So the chase is on. You say no, still. I say yes, still. We'll see where we are in a week, right? I don't know that you'll change your tune, because even if he goes and scores 3 goals in the next 3 games, I still think you're going to be like, oh, he's going to get on a cold streak. There's a chance I might be like, well, I don't know. I'm not so sure anymore, because I'm the one that's putting more out there with him saying, yes, he's going to get it in 8 and 15 games. So we'll see.
Yeah, and again, let me stress that I'm not being contrary or negative. Like, I hope he gets it. I don't see the road to it. And I also think that I'd like for him to have the stage all to himself.
Yeah, I know. You mentioned that before, and that makes a lot of sense, to be honest with you. That does, from a ceremonial perspective, from a celebration perspective, it does make a lot of sense, because if he does it in the last game of the season, there will be a celebration on the ice. There will be a lot of things, but there won't be that extra time to applaud and honor him, because you're going to go right into the playoffs. And then it's not about that at all anymore, because those goals don't count towards this, and it becomes all about exactly what the postseason should be about. Last thing I wanted to get to, Sean, before we're done, I had a conversation here at the GM meetings with Eric Tulsky, the general manager for the Carolina Hurricanes. Obviously, there was a lot that went on with the Hurricanes with the Mikko Rantanen situation. But what's so impressive to me is all of that was going on. Will he sign? Will he not sign? All this stuff. Oh, we might have to trade him. This team's won 7 games in a row, right? They're rolling right now. They don't play again until Thursday. They're playing exactly the way the Carolina Hurricanes you would expect them to play. They're aggressive. They're not giving up much. The goaltending is solid, but the shots against are down. They're keeping teams away from their net. Not one player is dominating. They're getting production from up and down the lineup. They have a 7-game winning streak. There isn't a player with 7 points. Sebastian Aho has the most points in the 7-game winning streak, 6. Okay? And he's the only one with there. Seth Jarvis has 5, and Taylor Hall has 5. They've responded to what really could have been a grenade around them, right? And it's been this response of just, we're going to go play Hurricanes hockey. It really has made me think about this in a different way. Like, and I talked to Eric Tulsky about it, and he agreed. It takes a certain player to play there, to play in this system. And he even said, he goes, there are players out there that are really good players for their teams that wouldn't be as good for us. Our job is to go out and get the players that would be good for us and the way Rod coaches them and the way Rod wants them to play. That's what they have there, but that's the miss on Rantanen because I don't think he was that guy.
I still don't know what to believe, right? Like, Rod came out and said that Rantanen said there were 4 teams he would go to, and Carolina wasn't one of them. Rantanen said, I would have happily played there. You know, I tried my best, and I tried to make it work. And, you know, when we realized that it wouldn't work, I thought it was best that I leave. You know, Tulsky said something different. So I still don't know what happened. But the way I look at Rod Brind'Amour is the way I looked at Bill Belichick, right, when he was in his prime. And he has a system, and it doesn't appeal to everybody because it's not individualistic. There is no place in the Carolina ecosystem for a superstar. They have stars, but nobody is above the team, right? It's like the old Lou Lamoriello Devils, except Carolina doesn't actually hide their stars, right? And they don't say, oh, Scott Stevens shouldn't win the Norris Trophy. We're not going to campaign for him.
Yeah.
But it's a collective, right? And that's what Rod preaches. And there are players who that's not attractive to.
Yeah.
There are players who want to have the opportunity to be the guy. And I don't know if there's ever going to be a guy in Carolina. There's going to be a group of guys, and I think that's really strong. And the argument that everybody makes is, well, you don't have that game breaker. I think Carolina has a ton of game breakers. I just don't think that they're in a position to freelance like they would be with some other teams. So, you know, that's kind of where I am on that. Like, I don't think it's a bad thing, right? I think it's a team game, and that room is so sacrosanct that they can absorb almost anybody, but you have to be willing to do it. And again, that goes back to the Patriots. When you think about all the guys that they brought in, that it was like, oh, that guy's never going to fit. Randy Moss, he'll never fit into that culture. That room is so strong that not only did he fit, he had one of his best years. And I look at that Carolina room, and I see it to be very similar. Like, I think that room with Brent Burns and all those guys that have bought in can absorb almost anybody as long as they're willing to give it a chance and to see what it is. So, you know, I think Tulsky's right. You have to find the right players, but I think it's a bigger pool than a lot of people think.
So they've been really good for a while, right? They've been arguably the best. They may have. I have to look it up. They may over the course of the last 5 or 6 seasons have the best points percentage in the league, or total when you total it all up in the regular season, or they're at least top 5, right? That's all well and good, Sean. But can they win the Stanley Cup? And that's the next question. And Eric Tulsky and I talked about this. He goes, listen, we have a lot. People say, oh, it's been our time for 5 years. He's like, Aho's like 26 or 27. Jarvis is 23. Like they have young guys too. They're young. Their defense is a little older, but they have young guys. They have a younger goaltender. In Kochetkov too, right? But so when do they have to go and then win the Stanley Cup to make all of this matter, to make it all worthwhile? Do you look at it in that way? Do we look at it in that way? I don't know that I want to look at it in that way, because I think it's every step of the way makes it matter. But because they don't have the guy, because they don't have the game breaker, if you will, who's allowed to go and just you be that game breaker, is that holding them back from going and winning?
Let me ask you a question, Dan.
I just asked you one.
And I'm going to answer with another question. And this is going to be my answer. Who's the game breaker in Florida?
Well, they had a 50-goal scorer in Sam Reinhart, right? That's pretty good.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
place
but
to
who's the game breaker? Who's the guy you look at and you're just like, that guy's going to take it all over? Look, Sam Reinhart scores 50 goals, no question, great player. Do you look at him in any game? Like, did you look at him and be like, oh, this guy?
Barkov takes games over. Barkov takes games over.
Not
he
in
doesn't
the
take
way.
games over like a Draisaitl or a McDavid or a McKinnon.
Yeah.
But Barkov takes games over.
But nobody, when they talk about Carolina, nobody's saying that's the guy we need to take games over. If they only had a Barkov, it would be all better. What they're talking about is a gunslinger.
Yes, you're right. You're 100% right. People thought it would have been Rantanen.
But maybe you don't need that. And I don't think it's a loss if they
Then
don't
get out
win
of the
this year.
second round without it.
And I don't think it's a loss if they don't win this year. Look, it's loaded, and I think they're going to be good for years to come. I think they've set up a pipeline where they're not going to dip for a long time. And I don't know, like, as a fan, what's better, right? Like, I think when you look at the business of hockey, like, you want to be good for a decade or more.
Yeah.
And have a shot at a cup.
That's what's better. Honestly.
Than be the St. Louis Blues.
Yes. Be a team that's in it every year. Be a team that's in it every year, and maybe one of those years you break through. Right? And you go win it, and you have the generational team that year. But for a decade, you're in the playoffs every year. You're giving your fan base a chance every year. You're giving your fan base hope every year that this can be the year. That's the way to do it. That's winning. That's a winning organization. That's a winning franchise. It may not result in a cup-winning franchise, but it results in a winning franchise. San Jose, perfect example. Never won it, right? But every year for a decade or more, they gave their fans reasons to believe. One year they broke through. They got to the Stanley Cup final. They lost. They kind of got banged up on the way, right? It didn't work out. They'll end without the Stanley Cup. But for a long period of time, they gave their fans hope that they could do it. The New York Rangers with Henrik Lundqvist, they gave hope for a decade that they could do it. One year they break through, they didn't win it. Honestly, you celebrate the Stanley Cup. That's great, and that's what you play for, and it becomes generational, and forever. It becomes forever, not just generational. But then if you can't keep up with it, then that team is just looked at as, oh, that was the great team, and there's nothing else.
Yeah, and so this isn't a referendum to me. This year isn't a referendum. You look around and you look at some of the teams that are in play, and they're clearly better than Carolina. But this is a Carolina team that I think the NHL is going to be dealing with for years. Like, the foundation's there. This isn't a one-off. This isn't, we're going to make a run this year and then we're going to pull back to the pack, right? This isn't the New York Rangers.
Yeah.
Right? They made a run to the Eastern Conference Final last year and now are scratching and clawing to try and get in the playoffs. Like, it's not set up that way. And as a fan, I think I would prefer that than the yo-yo.
Yeah. And we all thought Carolina would drop because they lost so many guys. And here they are. Second place, 7 wins in a row at a key time of the year. They're going to finish second in their division. Everything's fine. No worries. Let's not go crazy here. So, listen, I mean, it's impressive. That story I got with Tulski, they'll be out later this week. This was fun, Sean. Alex Killorn was great. We thank him. We talked some GMs. I got to get to work, though, because I got to go cover GM meetings now.
Yeah, have fun by the pool, Dan.
That's not what I will be doing. Well, it will be by the pool. I mean, the pool is there. It's not far, okay? But I'm not going to be sitting by the pool. I am here for work and no other reason, Sean. I work, I write, I talk to you, and then I go to bed and I do it the same day. Nothing else gets done down here.
Okay. I have other sources there, right?
Yeah, I understand. Anyway, this was a lot of fun, and as always, the podcast is brought to you by Skip. Skip to the good part and get groceries, meals, and essentials delivered right to your door on Skip. Enjoy the hockey.